And I just remember feeling the grace of these complete strangers who were willing to show up and give their love to someone that they'd never met. So back in 2019, my doctor told me that on a brain scan, they had found a tumor on my pituitary gland. But this comes after the fact of a couple years prior, I was hospitalized for getting Botox injections for my head down through my shoulder for a misdiagnosis from the doctors. They said I had cervical dystonia and they were going to try and treat the nerves with that. So I was actually hospitalized with botulism, pronounced dead in the hospital, and had to learn to walk, talk, speak, do all of those things again. And this was a diagnosis based off of 20 years of being in and out of the hospital almost every month since I was a kid. And at this point, though, when I got the brain tumor diagnosis, I had a doctor who was younger and believed me when I said that I didn't think that I would need surgery or medication. And he said he didn't know how that was going to happen, but I told him I was going to give myself 3 months and I would get back to him in 3 months. And if it wasn't gone, then we could have a better conversation. I remember hearing about Dispenza's story saying that he had healed his own body. And I thought, I'm familiar with this concept. I've heard of other people doing that before. So I was going to see myself in my wellness. I meditated every morning before school, and I decided to walk or run everywhere during this time to release energy out of my body. And then I would walk to school, which was like 6 miles away. And then I would be in class all day, trying not to think about what's going on in my body, which was very hard if anyone's ever been in that position. And then I would run to a float tank after school and just float for an hour listening to monks chanting. And then I would walk back home from there, and then I would meditate when I got home. And I did this every day for 3 months. When I went to get my MRI again, which is literally like a week before finals, before my graduation. So this whole time I'm like trying to graduate and not have this thing going on. And they took my MRI, and the technician said, I don't know what you're talking about, but you have no sign of a tumor in your brain. Which was about a year later. Going back in for my checkup, they found masses all through my uterus and up through my chest into my heart center. They told me they would have to remove my uterus entirely, and that they didn't know what they would say about the masses in my chest. And I said, well, I know I've done this before, but I haven't actually addressed the root of why I'm here. I know how to do it quickly and get back to that space, but I haven't stayed in that space. So I quit school and I got rid of everything I owned, and I moved to the countryside in the middle of Montana at my sister's house. And I again eliminated everyone from my life in that moment because I knew I had to get down to what was causing my stress, and it was a lot of anger. It was anger at myself and my environment, and I had been blaming a lot of other people for who I was. And I didn't like who I was. Even if others liked me and couldn't fathom me not liking myself, I didn't like myself, and I was angry at me all the time. And so I pulled out Dispenza's book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and I finally sat with it. And I locked myself in my sister's closet every morning at 5:30 because she has a million kids. And I would hear them running outside, and I would just sit in her dark closet on a chair, meditating and just seeing myself without my anger. It had nothing to do with the masses in my body. I'd already just faced that. But I had to deal with my anger and my lack of love toward myself. And I actually had 2 coherence healings during this time over the course of a year remotely. And I remember after each one, I expected to just like be walking on water, right? And there was disappointment after that feeling of just like not feeling this miraculous moment. But I remember this research that Dispenza had brought up, I don't know where it was at, that you can pray for someone in the past or in the future and it will still impact them. And I just remember feeling the grace of these complete strangers who were willing to show up and give their love to someone that they've never met. And that moved me incredibly because I was always that person for someone else. I didn't have that grace and love growing up. And that touched the spot of my anger, which is truly hurt, as we know. And it just bloomed. It blossomed and it rotted all over the ground and it turned into compost. And even though I didn't have a miraculous moment at that time to what I thought it should be, I knew it had changed. 9 months after the fact of getting that diagnosis of saying they were going to remove my uterus, I went back to the doctors and they said, I don't know how this happened, but there's no evidence of anything going on in your body. It is completely clear and it is completely clean. And whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And I was just like, great, see y'all never. And I've been clean and clear ever since. And that was in 2021, my final diagnosis. And I still get checked annually. But yeah, it's all good, man.